Pretty nice day out there today with highs of about 14 degrees and lots of sunshine. So it's a nice early spring day. Hopefully you can get out and enjoy it. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Ness on the other side of the glass of the control boards, doing a fine job. As always, we will open the phone lines in about an hour's time, as we do each and every day, and look forward to hearing from any of you. Had a pretty a spirited call-in segment yesterday. A lot of people talking still about, and we'll continue to talk about, the federal election. And with the debates coming up on Wednesday and Thursday, the French debate goes tomorrow night. The English debate goes Thursday. Well, we shall see if it moves the needle at all. So one of the questions that I will ask you is, are you decided yet? Are you perhaps undecided, I should say, would be a better way to phrase the question. Are you an undecided voter? Are you still not decided on who you want to or who you will support in the federal election? And if so, why is that? And what are some of the things that you'll be looking for in this debate? And will you watch the debate? And perhaps if you are decided, why have you already made up your mind? And might you possibly be flexible at all in who you will support in this election? Again, it's been quite an about face when it comes to the polls. We know this. And the question is, and has been, did Pierre Poilievre peak too soon with the double-digit lead in the 20-plus point lead in the polls for a very long time? And now the question might be, did Mark Carney perhaps peak too soon? Because it's hard to maintain a lead, and things can change in a hurry in an election. In particular, when you're looking at the issues that we're facing today. So these are some of the questions that we'll talk about. By the way, Don Desserud will join us, UPEI Political Science professor, to talk about all of this after the 12:30 news. And then again, we will open the phone lines between 11 and 12. Something else that you can talk about or discuss, and I'll talk with Rob Thacker about this as well during the Science Files today. Katy Perry and her all-female crew shot across the sky like a firework and blasted off into space on a Blue Origin rocket. The E.T. singer, along with journalist Gayle King and billionaire Jeff Bezos' fiancé, launched to the edge of space yesterday morning as part of Blue Origin's latest mission called NS-31. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Is this something that is distasteful in some way? Do you find that space tourism is and having space only accessible to the ultra-rich and well-connected? Is this something that bothers you in any way, or is this just another example of what's always been the case in this world? And that's if you can pay, you can play. And finances are the ultimate discriminator, folks. The discrimination in this world is something that we generally frown on, and rightfully so when it comes to ethnicity, skin color, sexual orientation, all of those things. These are barriers that we are eliminating. Not everywhere in the world, unfortunately, but certainly making strides in the Western world, I would say. But financial discrimination is the ultimate discriminator. If you don't have the bucks, folks, there's an awful lot you can't do. And there's an awful lot of places you can't go and you can't live and you can't experience. And this is one of them. So what are your thoughts on space tourism and for the ultra wealthy? What type of example does it set? Does it set the right example, or is it something that is perhaps a little discomforting in some way? What are your thoughts on this? Again, I'll get Rob Thacker's take on all of this as well. Just something that I thought was interesting. And of course, what's happening in the United States with Donald Trump and his policies. An American who is distressed, by the way, the United States government has been treating Canada, has bought advertising space in Vancouver to apologize to Canadians. Posters on lighted billboards near the Vancouver Art Gallery show the Maple Leaf with the words, "Dear Canada, we are so very, very, very sorry." It is signed, "Your American Friends." No names of organizations or companies are included, and the U.S. citizen who bought the advertising space told CTV News that he wishes to remain anonymous to ensure the message is not about any one single person. Has your attitude towards Americans been impacted by Trump's policies, and is that fair? Because some would suggest, and some have the attitude that, look, Donald Trump and the government of the day does not represent or is not representative of American culture in general. Now, in some cases, it certainly does represent U.S. sentiment and U.S. attitudes, but in many cases, it does not. So something else that you can weigh in on again when we open the phone lines in about an hour's time. And again, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in and listening. We very, very much appreciate it. All right, joining us now is Patrick Sullivan. Patrick Sullivan, of course, the president of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Patrick, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Hello, Todd. Hope you're having a great day so far.
Indeed, the weather certainly is nice, and look forward to enjoying it later on this afternoon. So let's talk about what happened yesterday with the Mayor of Halifax addressing the State of the Municipality address. Why is this an important event to have annually?
Well, I think it's an important event to have annually just because it presents the mayor an opportunity to tell primarily the business community, but the public as well. We'll certainly make that video available, sort of what he's thinking, what his or her, I guess in this case it's his, priorities are. And this was Mayor Fillmore's first opportunity to do that presentation, and I think he did pretty well. Okay, what were some of the key takeaways that you'd like to mention? Yeah, he did focus on three priorities. They were affordability, housing, and mobility. So, I think that probably fits in pretty well with the surveys that we've done with our business members, business and not-for-profit members. Affordability, of course, is a pretty big deal for people right this minute. We've had high inflation. We're starting to see salary increases slow down a little bit. We're faced with tariffs south of the border. We've had higher interest rates, although, again, they're starting to come down. So all of those, lead us to folks having affordability questions and concerns, understandably. Housing, we've seen Halifax without the number of housing units that it's needed. We've had slow growth in the municipality in terms of the number of new construction units, I guess, newly constructed units that we needed. And we're still seeing slow growth, but I'm glad he called that out and mentioned the number and sees that it's important to get back up. And then finally, mobility. We have a transit system that definitely needs work, and participation. I mean, we need people to take advantage of the great transit system that we have, but we need it to be, maybe I got ahead of myself, we need it to be a great transit system so they take advantage of it. We need people to utilize the transit system, and we need to ensure that it goes to the places it needs to in the hours that people need it to go. So those were three sort of priority areas, and I think it resonated well with the crowd.
Okay, on the transit file, first off, the ferries running from Dartmouth regularly canceled. That's just one example that I can think of in which reliability is been far from hitting the mark. And do you think that it's kind of the chicken or the egg? Which comes first, chicken or the egg, right? Do you need something that's reliable, but in order for it to be reliable, you need ridership and you need volume. But in order to have volume, you need reliability. So we're kind of chasing our tail here, are we not, with this? Yeah, for sure. I mean, transit systems in general don't make money. So it's just a question of how much money do you want to invest, or can you invest to make that great system, so that you're right, so that people take advantage of it.
the ferries have been an issue. I didn't realize until I talked to the folks at Transit how qualified, frankly, a ferry captain needs to be. So the requirements to be a ferry captain are very specific. There aren't as many as there probably should be. And it's fair to say that they need to increase the numbers to ensure that we don't have the shortages and the cancellations that we've had over the last little while. But it's interesting because that was one of the large opportunities that the mayor saw as well, which is, can we take greater advantage of the water that we have in front of us in the harbor to move people more quickly from whether it's Bedford to downtown, or from downtown to Dartmouth, or to, both of the ferry terminals in Dartmouth, or he actually brought up an interesting point, which is there an opportunity for the private sector to get involved in moving people around as well through water taxis or smaller ferries, which thought was an innovative idea. But clearly, we need to have a better transit system to get cars off the road. Getting those cars off the road will improve our mobility and improve the efficiency of the city.
In order to have a vibrant downtown core, that this is integral. I think we'd all agree with that, right?
I think that's true, but and I'm sitting in Burnside, so our office is in Burnside, and it's great over here. Mm-hmm. But we do need to focus on building that great downtown, and we've had significant residential growth. But we need to have businesses active in downtown, and we need to have more businesses considering downtown as well. And part of that is, how do you have that great transit system to get people down there efficiently, quickly, effectively, so that they can take advantage of the great things that are downtown?
Okay, let's talk about affordability, because I'm not sure empirically what the data would tell us, but man, oh man, when you anecdotally, there's a lot of people struggling out there when it comes to finding. Yeah. Every single day, I get emails from people. You see it in the news headlines daily. Affordability is far, far from where it should be here in HRM, despite whatever empirical data is out there. What are your thoughts on affordability?
Well, I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, we've seen a housing crisis in Halifax and, the greater Halifax area over the last few years. That's for sure. When COVID came and we had increasing numbers of people moving to the area, or folks who needed homes from other areas of Nova Scotia moving to Halifax. Clearly, we kind of missed the mark, which is why we had, a homeless problem, which is why we've seen people looking for homes. We're starting to come out of that a little bit, with now rental accommodations advertising and promoting that you can get 1, 2, or even 3 months free, when you move in and commit to a longer term lease. But I mean, frankly, those are higher end accommodations. If it's a new apartment, those are not affordable homes. We've seen the provincial government increase the number of affordable homes that they're going to build in the next little while as well. But overall, we need more inventory, and more inventory will help to keep prices a little bit more affordable. But there's no doubt. I know your callers will be calling in saying, what's affordable? We need lower cost housing. We need a greater number of housing units for sure to house those that need housing at a lower cost. And we need more housing in general, just to support the population that we've seen. To get back to affordability, yeah, I mean, inflation came out yesterday. I think it was 2.4%. But, when you add up 2.4% and then, 3% last year or 4% the previous year, things have absolutely gotten expensive, and we'll probably see them more expensive the next little while. So we do have to be aware that, when the city or when the province does things like increase taxes, or the federal government for that matter, people need more money in their pocket. We don't need to have, it would be better not to have various levels of government redistribute funds. It would be better just to keep that money in your pocket and spend it the way you'd like to spend it.
Yeah, when it comes to revenue in general, we know the taxation, 82% of the annual budget comes directly from the tax rate. And the mayor talked about potentially finding other streams of revenue. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's fair. We've been saying for a while that the system in Canada, which is federal governments and provincial governments can significantly increase taxes at any time, and it's income tax. So, we had a large number of people move to Halifax over the last number of years. Revenues for the province of Nova Scotia went up over $1 billion from the increased population and increased salaries. But the city didn't see that lift at all. So, when you put in a new subdivision, the city has to pay for the roads, and the city has to pay for the fire departments, and the city has to pay for the sewers, or Halifax Water does, but ultimately it's the city has to pay for those things. And they don't get their money until those houses are built. So in the system, here we are with greater than 50% of the population of Nova Scotia, and I think I heard yesterday that when you look at the GDP in Nova Scotia was up over 2% last year in 2024, and 99% of that growth came from Halifax. So Halifax is growing significantly, but it doesn't get those taxes until later. It has to, do a lot of the infrastructure setup before they get the taxes. So, systems need to change.
And of course, overarching all of this, like not only in our municipality, but throughout the country, is what's happening with the United States and Donald Trump and tariffs, and that was addressed as well, correct?
It was. We're seeing, I think there's certainly a receptivity, whether it's municipally and, provincially or federally, to support folks if they're impacted by tariff increases. Now, luckily, Halifax has, the military. We have a large government presence, whether that's a large municipal presence or provincial or federal in our community. So Halifax, when you look at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce ranking of cities across the country and how we'll be impacted, we're actually 35th in in potential impact. So we'll likely be in better shape than all the other cities. If you think about Windsor, Ontario, where they're making cars, those folks are going to be impacted number one, or first probably, and are likely impacted today. We're in better shape than they are, but ultimately, it gets back to the affordability. It gets to the cost of building materials. It's insulation. It's all kinds of things that are likely to be impacted, and the uncertainty of these tariffs. You really don't know from day to day what's going to change or what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty.
Patrick, always appreciate your input. Thanks so much, my friend, and we'll do it again.
All right. Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Patrick Sullivan, president of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Influencers could make or break the federal election. University of Ottawa report. We'll talk about that when we come back. With the federal election just over 2 weeks away, it's very difficult to open social media without seeing some sort of political content. New research from the University of Ottawa shows the impact that social media influencers can have on parties' campaigns, particularly on younger voters, could set their fate. Joining us to discuss all of this is Elizabeth Dubois, Associate Professor, Research Chair in Politics, Communication and Technology at the University of Ottawa. Elizabeth, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Indeed. So how do we define what an influencer is?
Yeah, so influencers are content creators on social media who gain a following. Sometimes that's a really, really big following. We call them mega influencers. Sometimes it's a smaller following. We might call them nano influencers. The idea is these are people who create a bit of a brand for themselves online, covering whatever they cover. Sometimes it's politics explicitly. Sometimes it's, fashion or food or whatever you want. And they create this brand and connect with community online.
Podcasters, would they be included?
Yeah, podcasters, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, TikTokers, those kinds of folks all kind of fit that bill.
Okay, so how much of a piece of the pie are influencers taking when it comes to influence?
Yeah, so when we think about our information environment and what feeds into how we make political choices and decisions on voting day, influencers are becoming a bigger and bigger part of it. Sometimes that's because we intentionally start to follow them, and other times it's because they just end up getting a lot of their content in our feeds. They show up on our screen whether or not we even intended to follow some influencers. And so they are really reshaping our information environment. Can we say exactly what percentage of people are going to change their vote based on what particular influencer? No, we can't really measure that, but we do know it's shifting what information is available.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it could go either way, right? So it is great to have these podcasters and YouTubers and others who are able to filter information for us. They can kind of frame it in a way that makes sense to us in our daily lives. This could be a way of engaging more people in our political system. But often influencers are being used without a lot of transparency. So it's hard to know if they've been paid by a political party to say a certain thing, or if they've been fed talking points. It's really hard to know who's coordinating what, and that limits our ability to know whether or not we're going to trust that information.
Okay, is I guess that either side of the political spectrum, I think all are guilty of perhaps of any of the negative connotations in association with influencing and disinformation. I think that there's enough to share to go around. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We see that the political parties are each kind of using influencers differently, but they're all doing it in kind of both good and bad ways is what it sort of seems like. We're in the early stages to know exactly what's happening, but it's definitely not, one partisan side is doing it for good and one partisan side is doing it for bad. It's all kind of an experimental mishmash right now.
The dangers of echo chambers. What are your thoughts on that? Because this obviously we discuss social media and the feeds and the algorithms and all that goes with that. This is kind of the ultimate echo chamber, is it not?
Yeah. So what happens when you only rely on influencers that you really like to get your information? You're going to really reinforce this thing where you just keep getting what you have already heard, what you already agree with. So what I would say is influencers entering the political space is not necessarily a problem, but it does require us to kind of go beyond just what feels comfortable and try and source additional information and try and get out there and follow a variety of different accounts. Also rely on other news sources, those kinds of things, so that we don't get stuck in those echo chambers.
Yeah, of course, and some people are influencers and perhaps don't set out to be influencers. I would think of perhaps Wayne Gretzky is an example of that, and there are others who kind of quietly might support somebody, but not be overtly political, but get caught up in this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And bringing up Wayne Gretzky is a really interesting one because he's got this celebrity status, right? Mm-hmm. And celebrities have been entering politics here and there for lots and lots of years. There's also these accidental influencers who are just like the average person who suddenly go viral online, and then all of a sudden their lives are turned upside down. So we have this kind of full spectrum that happens here. I think what's really important is to know that when you're following these accounts, not for political information, and then suddenly political information shows up in their feeds, you kind of just have to question, why is that? Maybe it is genuinely that they're this election matters so much. I really believe all of my followers need to be aware and need to go vote. But it's also possible that they're coordinating with some campaign. And so just kind of asking those questions is important.
Is the report available online, Elizabeth?
It is. Yeah, so you can head over to paulcomtech.ca and you can find the report. We've got it in English and French.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Elizabeth Dubois, Associate Professor, Research Chair in Politics at the University of Ottawa. We'll talk politics with Don Desserud when we come back. Joining us for a chat is Don Desserud, UPEI Political Science Professor. Don Desserud, thanks for doing it. We appreciate your time as always.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right, so we're in the home stretch now when it comes to the federal election and the debates. French and English debates go Wednesday and Thursday. How critical are the debates or not?
Well, they're not they do have a role to play. Perhaps I think the campaign teams overemphasize how important they are. But I'll give you a couple of perspectives. The first one is the fact that there's not much to be gained if you're the prime minister in a debate. So the rule of thumb is that prime ministers don't win debates. All they can hope to do is not lose the debate. So what's happening here is that by being on the same platform with the prime minister, all the other leaders now are elevated to the same status. They're all basically equals. But the prime minister, so they are going up. The prime minister has no place to go, so he's basically at the same level as them. So people will be watching to see how well Carney performs. There's been a lot of hype. This actually is going to help him, by the way. A lot of hype about the fact that Poilievre is a very skilled debater, very clever debater. He can really hit you, hard with a line that might knock you off your game. We don't know if Carney is skilled at debates. We haven't seen him function. Obviously, we haven't seen him in the House of Commons. That, however, might actually lower some expectations, and that's the second part of this. It's really all about how you meet or surpass expectations. If there's low expectations, surpassing expectations. This is what happened to Justin Trudeau back in 2015. He surpassed expectations so remarkably and they were very low that he did very, very well. So yeah, there's something, but there's not a lot to be gained if you're Carney. There's a lot to be gained if you're Singh. There's a lot to be gained if you're Poilievre as well.
Okay, but when it comes to Mark Carney, he's not a typical incumbent. He's not really had the job that long, and a lot of Canadians don't really know him. So might this be a little different?
Yeah, because that's what I mean. They're going to want to see how he performs under pressure. But he also has an image that we're still trying to get a grasp of. Like, who exactly is Mark Carney, and how does he want to present himself to the Canadian public? Now, I would have thought that given his incredible strength, is his background as a governor of both the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, that he would use that to his advantage. In other words, he doesn't need to be a politician. He doesn't need to show that he can be clever and have clever quips and be sort of glib as we tend to see in these formats. He needs to show that he has sort of the gravitas and the leadership style. But we haven't had a chance to really see that on the campaign trail. It's been sort of hit and miss, quite frankly. But fair enough. He has a job to do, and it's a very serious one right now. So they'll be looking to see how he performs. But if he can perform in a way that he shows that he does not get rattled, that he understands, he knows the files, is able to perform well, then he could do very, very well. Poilievre has to show that he's more than simply a person who's clever at zingers or in slogans. He's obviously a very intelligent person, but he has to show that he has a grasp of the bigger issues and that he's able to bring those in the debate and not simply be critical of the Liberals. And if he resorts back to the old thing, well, you're no different than Justin Trudeau, I think that's going to backfire on him terribly, because I think that people are saying that's old news. What do you have going forward? Right,
but that said, I think there is some legitimacy to framing Mark Carney as or the Liberals as this is 10 years of pretty much the same thing. You're going to have many of the same cast of characters, although there'll be some new candidates for Mark Carney to mine for a potential cabinet. But Carney was an advisor to Trudeau. Again, you're going to have many of the same cast of characters. I think that might be a bit of a winner when it comes to trying to drive that point home as to what you're going to get with the Liberal vote. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe. Now, you'll notice, by the way, that Carney has been talking about the new Liberal Party.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting line. Maybe they'll change the name, to the new Liberal Party.
Sure.
He's doing his best to disassociate himself from the Trudeau years. He's been talking about how being actually critical of Justin Trudeau, which is a bit surprising for a leader to come in this way. But you can sort of see why. The question is whether or not the public is still upset with the Trudeau years, if they even remember why they're upset with the Trudeau years. because so much of that was driven by the personality of the Prime Minister. People just became really annoyed with him as a person, and it becomes harder to identify exactly what the problems were. Not that there weren't problems, that's not my point, but people tend to forget those. So yeah, that is an issue. The question of whether the public is thinking, yeah, that we want it, we want a change, it's time for a change, which is a normal part of an election process after 10 years of the same government, but or whether they're more concerned with what's happening south of the border. That one, by the way, and if I can riff on that, that one, the idea of the fear of annexation, the fear of the tariffs, the fear of the destruction of the Canadian economy coming to the United States was a huge fueler of the support for Carney. That's not a sustainable emotion. People are not going to stay afraid forever. They want something more than that. They're going to want to see a confident plan on how to deal with it. They want to see a leader who's not afraid but knows what they're doing, and that's what both Poilievre and Carney have to do is not depend upon the fear as the motivation, but to show that they have confidence in a plan going forward.
All right. What about natural resources? We know that Pierre Poilievre he's full throttle when it comes to developing natural resources and pipelines and all that goes with that. And a lot of this is fueled about what's happened recently with Donald Trump, and this has happened here in Nova Scotia and other jurisdictions as well. Well, what can you tell us about Mark Carney and natural resources? Because the framing of him is that he's an environmentalist, that the Green Initiative is still a top priority and will remain a top priority for him. What are your thoughts on Mark Carney and the environment and environmental issues and natural resources?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think the problem that he's having is that he's not sure where he wants to position himself. He's clearly seeming to be pulling back from that. He wants to find a middle ground, I guess, but it's not clear to me what exactly that middle ground is, and I don't think that he's aggressively in favor of the environmental policies that his predecessor was. I think he understands those, but he seems to be far more concerned with basic economic stability and independence, and that may require, in fact, will require a re-examination of exactly those issues, including things like pipelines, which seem to be back on the agenda. But it speaks to your point. Like, is one of the problems that I think that the Carney campaign has had, and again, fair enough, he has to do his day job as well, is the clarity of exactly what he's going to be able to do. So what we have is a presentation of a person who clearly has the talent, ability, and experience to solve these problems. Second part of that has to be, okay, how exactly are you going to solve those problems? Tricky in an election campaign, because the more concrete information you put out there, the more you open yourself up to attack by the other parties. But eventually, we need to know the answers to questions exactly like that you have presented, which is, okay, what is your attitude towards this? Why is Alberta so angry? What plans do you have for a pan-Canadian energy strategy?
All right, tax havens and Brookfield management and the assets and all of these. Again, that they're going to go hard, or I would think that Pierre Poilievre and probably Jagmeet Singh and whoever else is on that stage will likely go hard at Carney when it comes to these issues. How important are these issues when it comes to Carney's response? Does he just say, look, I didn't break the rules, I'm doing what everybody else has done? How does he handle this? Yeah,
something like that. The honesty is the best approach. He can't say things that we're going to find out they're not true. He can't waffle on it. He has to be upfront and say, in my position, that's how you do your job. Now I have a new job. That's how I'll do this job. I will take whatever measures are necessary to ensure that I do this job properly. But be forthright. Don't apologize. But just explain what's happening. As you say, if nothing illegal was going on, then he shouldn't have to apologize for it. But he has to be clear about it. And the worst thing you can do is say, no, I did not do X, Y, and Z, only to find someone pull out something from the past and say, "We have exactly what you did." So there's no information out there that's not going to be found. So he just has to be clear and straightforward about it. And I don't think that's the main driver of Canadians right now in terms of their voting. But clarity, honesty, integrity might very well be.
Right, crowd sizes at rallies. This is something that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are making a lot of because they're getting big numbers out. Some would suggest that they're paying people or whatever, busing people who. I don't know how much validity there is to any of that. I think that large crowds are always good, but how much relevance do they play here when it comes to the eventual outcome?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of publicity, in terms of good media moments, sure, that they look great. I mean, to think of the alternative, if you have an empty hall, that is a disaster. But whether they really advance the cause, well, it's all the question of the iceberg effect. Like, is this the tip of an iceberg? Does this show that if that many people show up, there's for every person that shows up, there's 10 more that's supporting you? Sure, but they're all getting decent crowds. It's a big event. Who doesn't want to see a celebrity? And these are our leaders are celebrities. So it's not irrelevant. I would look more to see if they have poor crowds and say that would be a real problem. Big crowds, well, what else would you expect? I'd be surprised if they weren't packing a room. I'd be surprised if they weren't choosing their rooms carefully enough to make sure the rooms were packed, by the way, as well.
Yeah, bemoaning polling and calling into question pollsters, I don't know that that's a winner. What are your thoughts?
No, and they need to look at those polls really carefully because the Conservative support has not really declined very much. So if they're thinking somehow that there's something strange going on, what's strange is going on, and it's not strange, is that NDP and Bloc supporters are moving over to the Liberals, and I don't see why that would be a surprise in this kind of an election. If they suddenly were showing a huge drop in support for the Conservatives, they'd have a reason to be concerned, but there's not, and those numbers look pretty accurate to me.
Okay, what are your thoughts on a majority here for either of these two parties? What are the expectations of that?
It's still anybody's game. Anything can and will change back and forth. This is probably one of the most volatile elections that we've seen in a long time. The things to look for are the permanency of the vote. So there's two different questions that people get asked. Who are you thinking of voting for? How firm is your commitment to that party? The CPC has much better numbers on the firmness of the commitment. That's important. And then secondly, the other big one, the obvious one, is the regional breakdowns. It's very nice to be peaking in Toronto or peaking in Alberta, but you have to have a distribution of those votes in order to translate those into seats. But I still think it's anybody's game. But the compilation polls seem to suggest that the Liberals are in pretty strong territory, but are looking for an election win unless there's a disaster between now and the election. I'm not so confident. I think this is. I don't know if you saw the Masters on Sunday,
sure did, yeah.
but that's the election campaign there, right there. Rory McIntyre's play, which was absolutely amazing. But the up and down, that's what we're going to see in between now and the actual polling day.
Don, always great. Appreciate it. Thanks, my friend.
Okay, you take care.
All right, you as well. Don Desserud, UPEI Political Science Professor, HRM resident, still open to welcoming U.S. tourists despite tensions. We'll find out what Ross Jefferson of Discover Halifax thinks about all this when we come back. A new study shows Haligonians are still welcoming to American tourists despite political tensions between the two countries, though some concerns remain. A new survey from Narrative Research shows 83% of Haligonians remain open to welcoming American tourists. Joining us to discuss all of this is Ross Jefferson of Discover Halifax. Ross, thanks for joining the show.
Todd, it's great to be with you.
All right, so it can't be understated or overstated, to whichever phrase you want to use, how important tourism is to the region, right?
Yeah, it is. Obviously it contributes a lot to the economy here in Nova Scotia. In fact, here in HRM alone, it's $1.3 billion that is left behind by visitors every year. And, that's actually an export. A lot of people don't think of tourism as an export, but it qualifies as an export. It is outside dollars coming into the province and coming into the region. So it is really important for us. But it's also important for us beyond just the economics. I think continuing to have connections globally is important. Enabling friends and family to connect around the world is important. Tourism and travel is, has a couple of different opportunities for the community, economic and social.
How important are people's attitudes towards being welcoming here? Obviously, it's huge.
Yeah, it is. I think Canadians take pride in being welcoming, and I think we might even double down on that here in the Maritime provinces. I think we commonly refer to ourselves, and others often refer to us as being exceptionally friendly. So we were pleased with the results of the research, and we were curious ourselves whether that was changing, and we're delighted to see that it's holding quite strong.
Okay, what can you tell us about some preliminary numbers heading into the busy tourism season? Are looking good? Are they moving? We're moving target? Where are we?
Yeah, it's still a little bit early. Of course, a lot of people travel for a lot of different reasons. So we've got a very strong convention business that's still expected to continue for this year and into the future. We've got a lot of people that are traveling from within the Maritimes that often come to the HRM region for lots of different reasons, from shopping and sports and entertainment. And of course, we have others that are flying further abroad, visiting Canada, visiting throughout the Maritimes. And of course, that's important for us as well. I think what we're really pleased about, overall, 96% of the respondents said that they're going to be welcoming to tourists. And you say, well, that's not quite 100%, but, 0 said that they would be unwelcoming. And what that means is, there will be some people that are just indifferent. And in that particular case, about 4% said they were indifferent. Now, if they specifically know that it is a U.S. visitor that's traveling, we're still very encouraged. 83% are going to be going out of their way. They're welcoming to U.S. visitors. 10%, again, neither welcoming nor unwelcoming, just sort of standard quo. So it's still really encouraging. And, I think we would expect that anywheres in the country, and in fact, probably not even just in Canada, even in the United States itself. There are very different, strong opinions when it comes to politics. And I'm certain that even visitors traveling within the U.S., they'll get picked out if someone's wearing a red hat and perhaps boasting about their support of a particular political agenda. No matter where they are in the world, I think someone's going to comment on that, and it's no different here. So, but we are very encouraged by the results, and we know that we will be welcoming our friends from all around the world again this summer.
Okay, cruise ships. That's something that's predetermined, is it not? Though we already know what the cruise ship activity will be. Do we not?
Yeah, we know how many ships will be coming in. Of course, there's always people that will still be adjusting, making the purchases a little closer to when they travel. So while the number of ships are usually confirmed by this point in time, we're still obviously watching for the uptick in actual people that will be booking cruises as well as flights into the region.
Okay, and when it comes to, I guess that was going to be the next question I was going to ask you about flight travel. We don't know, but what's the expectation, I guess, when it comes to people flying into Stanfield?
Yeah, look, it still continues to be high for us. We don't expect to see any significant drop from U.S. visitation. I'll share, I think, an important stat. Here in Canada, Americans will spend $13 billion traveling inside Canada every year. But Canadians actually typically spend double that traveling to the U.S. So that number is about $26 billion. We do know that there are definitely going to be less Canadians traveling into the U.S. Our study had suggested upwards of around 60% would be considering changing their travel plans. So we think that there's a windfall of Canadians that will likely be changing their U.S. plans, which could include staying in Canada or traveling elsewhere in the world outside of the U.S. So we're optimistic and we're hopeful to see that uptick in Canadian domestic visitation happening as well.
And of course, the currency exchange rate is huge right now. It costs a lot of money to go to the States. I know I was just there for a week, so that's at play as well, right?
It sure does, and that really affects Canadians more than it does Americans. If there's an American living close to a border state or on a border state, they might be a little bit more aware of the currency difference. And when you move further abroad, it is not as well known. Of course, when they arrive here, they certainly see the benefit and they love the benefit, and they'll tell people about it. It is not necessarily as broadly known throughout all of the states, but Canadians certainly see it, and we will be definitely traveling less to the United States over the next 12 months.
Okay, Ross, appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks very much, Todd.
All right, take care. Ross Jefferson, Discover Halifax. Now, what is on your mind, folks? We got some time for you. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. What are your thoughts on whatever you've heard or whatever you'd like to get into? Perhaps you'd like to weigh in on the federal election. And are you decided? Are you undecided? Are you waiting for some type of epiphany or some type of policy? If you've not decided yet, who do you trust? Who do you think would be the best prime minister? Or whatever else you'd like to get into. Again, the way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. What is on your mind on this Tuesday? Again, 902-405-6000. Are you sick of the federal election yet? I know that sometimes people get tired of this. But look, it's critical and integral that we remain dialed in and plugged in and talking about this, folks. It truly is, and we can't take it for granted that we have a democracy. As flawed as it is, I get it. It's far from perfect, but we have to continue to be engaged and discussing these things. And I think it's important that we have this opportunity to do so on this show and share your views. What are your thoughts on the federal election? Are you decided or undecided at this point? I guess is one of the questions that I'll ask. Have you made up your mind, or are you still pondering or considering your options? And if you are undecided, why? Why have you not? Why are you flexible at this point? I would dare say that probably most people would have their minds made up at this point, but I know that said, some of you are still not decided. And if so, why is that? What are you hoping to hear from either or any of these leaders during the debate? And will you watch the debate? 902-405-6000, that is the way to reach us. And what continues to be the ballot box question, in your opinion? Is it still Donald Trump in the United States and how to handle Trump and what's going on with these tariffs? On again, off again. And we know that the chaos that is going on in the U.S. is going to be a huge issue for any prime minister, any political leader for that matter. What is the ballot box issue, in your opinion? 902-405-6000. So those are a couple of the things that you can talk about. What about Americans in general and your attitude towards Americans? Has it been influenced? I'm sure that for many of you it has been, but is that fair or unfair? And the reason why I bring this up is because an American who is distressed by the way the United States government has been treating Canada has bought advertising space in Vancouver to apologize to Canadians. Posters on lighted billboards near the Vancouver Art Gallery show the Maple Leaf with words, "Dear Canada, we are very, very sorry." It's signed "Your American Friends." Do you feel as though the average American owes you an apology? Or do you feel as though or do you delineate and separate an American from the government that is Donald Trump? And this administration, which is mired in constant chaos, perpetual chaos. 902-405-6000. Also something else, and I'll talk to Rob Thacker about this story, that I thought I'd throw this out there, and then we'll go to the phones. Katy Perry and her all-female crew shot across the sky like a firework and blasted off into space on a Blue Origin rocket. She, along with Gayle King and billionaire Jeff Bezos' fiancé, launched to the edge of space yesterday morning as part of Blue Origin's latest mission called NS-31. Do you have any concerns or issues with space tourism? Access to the ultra-rich. Is this just another example of what has always existed, just another frontier for it to be magnified? Money is the ultimate discriminator, folks. It truly is. We talk about discrimination in this world, which exists and probably always has and always will when it comes to ethnicity, skin color, sexual orientation, political persuasion. But my, oh my, when it comes to the true divider, it is money. If you can pay, you can play, folks. And if you don't have money, you don't have a lot of access, including even a basic fundamental place to live, let alone a trip to space. So do you have concerns with space tourism? Or is this just another example the ultra-rich will play in exotic locations that are not accessible to the rest of us, including space? 902-405-6000, or whatever else you've got in your mind. Perhaps you've heard something else that you've heard that you've agreed or disagreed with. 902-405-6000. Donna, hello.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Welcome back,
Thank
and
you.
congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What I want to talk about was some of the dirt. Well, I don't know if you're aware of some of this stuff. I just became aware of it yesterday when I was listening to the talk show, the Cross Canada one that follows your show.
Yeah.
And about this Buttongate, they were laughing and joking. The Buttongate scandal, they're calling it the Buttongate scandal.
Yes.
I think that is disgusting that those Liberal staffers did that to put the Conservatives in a bad eye. And to me, it sounds like it's a bit of political interference. And how stupid were they to stand at a bar and laugh and joke about it? And some reporter heard them. Good for the reporter.
Yeah, that's
It
true.
was actually on the CTV late news last night about this. And a lot of people are quite concerned. And while you're away, I don't know if you know about this, but there was also Liberals in Nepean, where Mark Carney is running against Barbara Ball, I think her name is. They were stealing and damaging the Conservative signs, taking the wooden stakes, and then using them to put Liberal signs on in their Liberal territory. But they were stupid too, because on each stake they had some painting of that they were the Conservative signs. So they got caught doing that too. And then there was a list of people that are running in where Pierre is running in Carleton. I think they said there was a list about 90. I don't know if that's other people that put their name on that they were running. It's just, I have never, ever in my life, and I'm a lot older than you, seen any politics, municipal, federal, provincial, like this. It's dirty, dirty pool. And it's turned me. I definitely would not vote for Mark Carney, and he said even these staffers, he said, he was going to put them someplace else or whatever. On the spot, firing them right off the bat. He should have shown leadership and said, you're fired, get them out of here. And I'll say one more thing, and I'm wondering who paid for all these buttons. Other people had to be in on this Buttongate scandal thing that they did too. And I'll say no more. But welcome back, and all the best to you and your wife.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. I'm not sure what else I can add to the button thing. Obviously, it's not good behavior. Is it a huge scandal? No, it's not a huge scandal. There are a couple of staffers, and who knows what direction they were given or how much autonomy they took or who paid for the buttons. I don't know. But look, it's not cool, obviously. But look, it's politics, and politics is dirty. It's a dirty game these days, folks. If it's not always been. But I can't defend them. Should Mark Carney have dismissed them from the campaign? Well, I don't know that Mark Carney has the authority to do so. I think the party would have more authority to do so, and they should be dismissed. And yeah, they were idiotic for bragging about it in a bar, and good on the reporter who brought it to light. So look, I'm certainly would never defend it. It was wrong, 100%. But is it going to matter when all is said and done? Is it going to move the needle? Is it going to change the outcome of the election? I would suggest not. 902-405-6000. Peter, hello.
Congrats, buddy. I hear you went off and got yourself married.
I did. Thank you, sir.
Well, best of luck to you and her. Todd, that last thing.
That sounded a little doubtful, I must say.
Well, the odds aren't with you. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I hear you.
If you were down at Vegas, they'd have been rolling dice on the odds. Anyways, the issue I want to bring up is that story the woman just brought up might not move the needle.
Yeah.
But this story might, because an RCMP sergeant in Vancouver and a detective were pretty upset with CSIS information that was given to Parliament and was never acted on. And they just released an open letter, a public letter to Mark Carney that implicates 9 members of Carney's cabinet in foreign interference. All the charges are listed, and they're all named, and they just put the reputations on the line because they're at the point they're watching. I guess would have to call it corruption and nothing being done about it. And as police officers, they said enough is enough, and they just put that out here this morning. So it's a big breaking story. It's on X.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what other platforms it'll show up on today, but it's a huge story.
Yeah. Okay.
So
go ahead.
Well, and one of the people that are named are the guys, the chief of staff working for Mark Carney right now, and that's Marco Mendocino.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess people have to go to the ballot box, and they're probably going to have to consider a couple of things, because yesterday, Todd, I had to put gas in my vehicle, and I was paying something like, I think, 23 cents a liter or 20 cents a liter less. And I've been paying that additional amount almost for over the last 6 years, paying carbon tax. And the Liberals hung their hat on that, basically saying, if we don't pay this tax, the world's going to come to an end. And then prior to an election, when they canceled the tax, they didn't cancel the legislation. And Mark Carney wrote a book, and his raison d'etre, his actually reason for being is the whole carbon industry. And if you go read his book in his own words, I'm kind of doubtful of what politicians say. They have a long track record of saying one thing and doing another. And, I noticed that everybody that was in the Trudeau cabinet virtually is back. And people who had left under scandal, 3 of the worst of them are back. So I guess, my wife and I sat down last night. We were crunching numbers to try to figure out actually how much money that we've spent additionally, not just in gas, but because everybody that hauls things with gas had to bump their prices. And we started figuring out since the Trudeau government's been in power since 2015, our disposable income has dropped by 41%. So I guess when it comes time, I can either vote for more of that, or I can vote for less of it.
I guess, Peter. One of the pushback argument, of course, is that this inflation is not unique to Canada. This has happened as a result of COVID, and I'm not making excuses, but I'm just saying that that's the pushback. What's your response to that?
Actually, I saw some data yesterday on a financial show, and they said that I think it was out of 24 of the top nations, Canada ranked at the very bottom. I'll give you an example, Todd. I've got kids that are under 35, and the odds of the average 35-year-old being able to have enough money to buy a house today are slipping away rapidly. Yeah. I'm a little older than you. I'm just about to turn 67. But on my first job, Todd, I could buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house overlooking the water in Port Hawkesbury for less than 1 year's pay working at the Department of Natural Resources. And that wasn't exorbitant by any means. Yeah. And that was common. That same house today, and this is 40 years later, would cost more than 5 years' pay to be able to purchase. So you can't blame it all on the Liberal government. But all I know is how much my cost of living has gone up in Canada. And when I compare it to what's happened in the U.S., their mean average income has gone up 18% more than here in Canada.
I guess, Peter. The question that I would ask you then would be, sorry to interrupt you, but in the interest of time, if it were a conservative government that during the pandemic and in responding to the pandemic, do you think that things would have been different here in Canada?
Actually, I do, but you know what? I have to agree that they're both wings of the same bird, and there is no savior coming to save us.
Yeah.
So now people are forced, you're going to pick the lesser of the two evils. And all I know is the evil I've had to deal with for the last 10 years and what it's done to our disposable income and our cost of living.
Yeah. Okay.
And for me to go out and do this again, it'd be like slamming your hand in a car door and then complaining that your hand was sore, and then do it every week for the next 4 years and continue to complain that your hand is sore.
Okay,
maybe that's just me, Todd.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks for your comments, Peter. Appreciate the call. Take care.
All right, bud. Okay,
all
bye.
right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls. So to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Gene, hello.
Hi, good morning.
Hi there.
Hi, you were concerned, or you asked a question if we should be upset with the Americans because of this tax and all that, right? How we treat them as neighbors.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You can't blame them. You know, the government, they're even saying online and talking on Facebook how they feel sorry for us because what's happening with us, with our government, you know. So, you know, this is why why we have wars, because of what the government has done to each, you know, city, country, or state, or whatever. But, you know, the war that we have to have really is against our government. And why we, the people, can't stand up and say what we want. You know, they overspend, they're greedy, and we can't even, I've signed so many petitions against things that we didn't want to go through. And they went through whether they ignored what we said. You know, why can't the people have their say? Why they're the ones that are causing all the problems, you know, forcing the people on the street to live on the street and forcing people to be hungry. You can't blame anybody else.
Okay, I'm not really quite sure what your point is.
Well, why should we be, you know, upset with what our neighbors or their government's doing to us when what our government's doing to us?
Well, okay, I guess so. Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. Hello, Rick.
Hey, morning. I saw your picture of you and Kelly.
Nice.
In Las Vegas. I had no idea you were 6'9".
There you go. Not quite.
I'm a short guy. Anyway, congrats on that.
Thank you.
Look, I have Mark Carney's book. Somebody gave it to me, and I'm no Mark Carney fan. I'm not hiding that, but I went to the carbon tax section of the book right away to see exactly what he said, and it's just two large paragraphs. But what it does, it lays out the exact, when I say exact, I mean word for word, policy that Canada had for the carbon tax, the incremental increases until 2030. The whole thing is laid out right there. It's exactly what Justin Trudeau and their government followed. And that book was written, of course, in 2021.
Yeah.
Or probably written in 2020. It came out in 2021. So anyway, there's no doubt about it that Carney was the main economic advisor of Trudeau through those years. And the evidence is right in his book. And I hope Polyev brings it up in the debate. But anyway, that's all I got to say.
Well, Rick, let me ask you this. Do you think that the average voter doesn't already believe that or get that or understand that? I think that most people understand that, don't they?
No, I don't think they do. I have a large amount of Facebook friends, and the stuff I'm seeing, from most of them is the opposite of that. They think he is God incarnate, okay? They accuse, one guy today said, I've got to keep it simple. I don't want a racist, misogynist, just plain stupid person to lead this country. And he was talking about Poilievre. That's the kind of thing I'm seeing. And sometimes you respond, sometimes you don't. But if my Facebook friends elected the next government, it would be another 4 years of the Liberals.
Well, I guess, Rick, the question is that do you think there's enough undecided people out there to move the needle at this point?
Well, I hope so. And I would add one thing, that probably we should add a little more weight to the numbers at the rallies that Poilievre is getting, because I just used the previous big election that we watched, which was Trump in November. And leading up to that, I mean, if you weren't a Trump fan, you probably didn't, look too much at the rallies to see how many people there were. But they were huge, and I would suggest that proportionally, Poilievre's rallies are huge as well. So, to me, that's a bright light. I guess what I'm trying to say also is I think that Carney is going to bring back the carbon tax in a heartbeat. And I say that because if you read the language in his book, you can tell that it's not just an idea, it's a philosophy. And it's a deep, deep philosophy to save the planet. That's what he thinks he's doing. And so Canada has to lead by example, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I just... If he brings it back, I'll call you back and say I told you.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Appreciate the call. Take care.
Bye-bye.
902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Here's an email from Mike. Then we'll go back to the phones. Mike says, I'm tired of the Conservatives blaming the inflation in housing prices on the Liberal government. Inflation is up all over the world, and the last time I checked, the Liberal Party only had power in Canada. I'm not defending the Liberals, but not everything that happened in the world is their fault. Conservatives will blame anything on Trudeau and the Liberals. If a meteor crashed into the earth, killing millions of people, they would blame the Liberals for that too. It's getting tiring. That comes from Mike. 902-405-6000, and that's true. And some of what you said is true, for sure, Mike. Absolutely. Inflation is not unique and has not been unique to Canada. And England, you go across Europe, you go throughout the United States, you see a lot of these same issues. That all said, though, it's pretty clear that immigration has run and has been out of control. Not only in Canada, but again in some of these other countries that I talked about. And that has been a part of the challenge, a part of the problem. We do need some immigration. Of course we need immigration. But out of control immigration targets, unchecked, unfettered, well, it has been part of the challenge. Corporate greed has been another huge issue when it comes to inflation. We know all of this. But yes, to Mike's point, not unique to Canada. But that all said, though, it's pretty evident that the 10 years that the Liberal government had, they ballooned the public sector even before the COVID pandemic. The public sector far outstripped the pace of growth of population growth here in Canada. And they're look, the Liberals can't completely disconnect themselves from what happened when it comes to inflation and affordability and housing and all of these other issues. You can't just disconnect from it. That said, conversely, you can't blame them for it all either. Ultimately, the electorate will decide. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Paulette, hello.
Hi. First of all, I want to say congratulations. First of all, I want to say there are a lot of people I feel that are undecided because I go shopping, I hear people talking, I talk to strangers, and a lot of people are undecided. They really are. And I did find the cost of living have went up, even in some canned foods and that I felt shouldn't have went up. And second of all, I know way back, Danielle Smith had said she wanted to depart from Canada, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm hearing people say, I've heard people say, don't ask me who they are because I just go out and talk, ask people opinions. And I've heard people say, and I want to know if it's true, you can check on it for me and put it on your program. Did Danielle Smith say if the Liberals got in, she was separating from Canada? Did she say that?
I don't.
I'm just hearing
I don't think she said anything that overt or that direct. Perhaps she mused that if the Liberals get in, then she will look to perhaps gauge the appetite for some type of separation. But I don't think she directly said we're leaving Canada if the Liberals win. Perhaps.
Okay, I just had to ask.
Yeah. But again,
because I had heard it.
Well, look. You're what you're going to see, Paulette, is Danielle Smith, and if the Liberals get in, and Mark Carney does go in the direction that many suggest that he would, and that certainly what he has written in his book and what the ideology in which he has professed to have for decades now, you will see a very disgruntled Western Canada for sure, because they will feel as though that natural resources and getting oil and getting that pipelines built and all of that now's the time to do it because of what's happening in the United States. And if not now, then it'll never happen, probably, is their viewpoint. And you will see a very disenfranchised, disgruntled electorate in Western Canada if, in fact, in my opinion, Mark Carney wins the election.
Well, I hope Canada sticks together. And as far as people coming from the States, I like them coming here. I have nothing against the people. It's Trump I don't care for. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I wanted to ask.
Okay, all right. Take care. 902-405-6000. Again, I don't think Danielle Smith has said directly that we are leaving Canada. I don't think she's ever been, but she has certainly talked about it and floated the idea of gauging the appetite for wanting to stay in the union of this country if, in fact, Mark Carney is elected, and if, in fact, they proceed with the Green Initiative. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Hello, Mark.
Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well. You?
Good. Congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you, sir.
Look, I just want to push back a little bit, Todd. You just had a caller call in, and he talked about the economic downfall due to the Liberals the last 10 years. Yeah. And you kind of pushed back, and you kind of said I don't think the Conservatives would do any better. I don't think it's helpful, and I won't.
No, I didn't say that. I asked him whether he thought that. I didn't say that.
I think that those types of questions are just silly because they're based in feeling and not facts. And I think we need to stay, especially with you being in the media. I think your role should be more based on facts as opposed to feelings from your position. That's all I'm going to say on it. I'm not saying I'm 100% of the right all the time. I'm just saying I think your role should be more factual as opposed to these pushing back there. And I don't care whether it's Conservatives or the Liberal. I just don't think they're beneficial. That's all.
Oh, well, I respectfully disagree. I think how people feel does matter. And
the way people feel, yes, Todd. But as you being part of the media, I think it's important that you keep the conversation from yourself rooted in fact.
Well, Mark,
not to try to blame the Conservatives. You have no factual basis to say that the Conservatives would have done worse.
No, I have every right to ask the question. Do you think that the things would have been different? Well, Mark, look, that's what a talk show host has. It's about
you're part of the media. The media has a responsibility to stay factual and unbiased.
Do you know how boring the show would be, Mark, if I never had an opinion?
I disagree. I think the callers can call in. I think it's your role to navigate and stick to facts.
Well,
and I find you when it comes to the Conservatives, you get defensive and you revert to doing the feelings as opposed to speaking facts.
All right, that's your opinion.
Factually, Todd, we know the Conservatives would not support the decriminalization of hard drugs. We know for a fact that they never would have done that. The Liberals did. And now, because of that problem, they have now recriminalized that. So we have a bunch of people addicted to these heavy drugs that were using them and no risk of being criminalized, and now they're addicted, and now they've changed that. That's a Liberal problem. The Liberals caused that. So by saying, well, I don't know if the Conservatives would have done any better. And I think that was more how your statement was. Anyways, we'll disagree, Todd, but at least today you didn't call me an idiot, and I appreciate that. You have yourself a good day, sir.
See you later. Take care. 902-405-6000. Look, I hate to tell you, folks, but that's the job of a talk show host in any market in this country, in this continent, in this world, to have an opinion. That is priority one, is have an opinion, because it sparks a conversation. Now, I'm not saying just have a ridiculous opinion based on nothing. I try and base my opinions on facts or on information. But what are facts? Because one person's facts are another person's myths. And I'll give you an example. I'm not saying that safe injection sites work or don't work or what, but there's widespread study out there that would tell you that criminalizing and throwing everybody in jail who's doing drugs and being tough on crime doesn't work. There's evidence out there to suggest that. Now, you can find evidence that would say otherwise, right? But you say stick to the facts. One person's facts or another person's myth. Who determines what facts are? 902-405-6000, I guess. Look, folks, I'm going to continue to have an opinion. And that's, I would dare say, the vast majority, if not everybody, minus the previous caller, would want that. Hello, Rob.
Yes, hello. I listened to your most recent caller, and I understand, I'm 65, but I understand that, radio talk shows are there to incite, different type of views and this and that. And for your last caller to kind of, put you in the pigeonhole of not, being the unbiased referee on the hockey rink is not fair. And I say that because I enjoy listening to different views, different opinions, and the talk radio is there to generate that. So that's where I am with that.
Okay, Rob, appreciate it. Thanks for the call, pal. Take care.
Oh, one more thing, if you got time.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I was listening to your talk with the counselors yesterday.
Yeah.
And I forget which counselor it was, but you had one male, one female.
No, they were both Sam Austin and John St. Amand. They're both guys, both males.
Okay, well, one of them was, kind of suggesting that they don't know about these e-bikes on the sidewalks and this and that. And I'll just make this quick comment that any municipality I've ever lived in has the ability for the councillors in council to make whatever bylaw that you'd like to help the safety of the community. So I think that maybe that person needs to have a look at their job description a little bit better. I don't mean to be critical, but that's what I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Justin, hello.
Hello, Todd. How you doing today?
I'm well, you?
I'm doing fantastic. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for, no problem at all. Thanks for putting on the show.
You got it. Great. Thank you.
Want to talk politics for a minute there?
Sure.
Federal election coming up. For me, I think, and for people I talk to, the big issue is really threefold. And with where we're at in Canada right now, focusing on fiscal responsibility, energy security, and military security are really the three issues that we as Canadians should be focused a lot on right now, because without those three things, you don't really have a nation. That's true. I think those need to be key issues. And I'm looking to Norway and how they set up their sovereign wealth fund back in the 1990s, and where it is today at 1.8 trillion, which equates to about $325,000 per citizen. It's the largest one in the world, and they used oil and gas to get there. It's not the only way you could do it. That's what they used. Mm-hmm. We are a resource-rich nation. We have a lot of oil and gas. We have a lot of other natural resources that we could use to initially jumpstart our path towards having a fund similar to that. And I just think all other issues are kind of subservient to those three top issues. And I think we should be voting for the party that puts those three front and center.
Justin, you sound like you're a fairly young man. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
Yeah, 37.
37, so you're pretty young. What about the environment? Any people your age, do they care about the environment and environmental issues, or is it, or are you more concerned about being able to afford a house and to raise a family and all the things that people your age want to do?
Well, again, the environment's important, and it's not to be taken as a secondary issue. But I mean, we are very good in Canada, probably one of the best in the world at getting resources out in the most environmentally friendly way possible to do so. Yeah. But again, if you don't have wealth, if you don't have security as a nation, energy security, financial security, regardless of what happens to the planets, you're not going to be around long anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
You're going to be taken over by somebody else. So really, those three topics for me, and I know for a lot of people my age, are front and center.
Interesting. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate the call.
No problem.
All right, take care. You got it, 902-405-6000. Graham, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, you?
Not so bad, not so bad. Yeah, I'm calling here, Todd, just to tell you, as I said, I'm not going to vote, and I want to tell you why.
Okay.
Well, Todd, I read a lot of history, and it is unquestionable that the world is heading towards a pretty serious crisis. And if you look historically, I mean, the first step is the states, when they start worrying about the power of others, they start to decouple economically, and this has happened in the last 10 years. You can look like foreign direct investment in China is cratered. The next step is a trade war. Mm-hmm. Is that economies start to really protect themselves from other economies. And I think we know the next step, right? And I mean, democracy is a wonderful thing, has some pros and cons. And when we've come historically, in World War I and World War II, I guess you could look in the last century, when we've come to the point that the government has to respond, what is formed is like a national government where everyone gets behind, all the parties get behind the idea, or what is needed. And I don't hear any of the parties talking about that now, even though I know they know. I know Carney knows this. I know Poilievre knows this. If someone would, sell themselves and say, I am a national leader and I will work with both parties, I will work with everyone because this crisis is coming, I would vote for that person. But I don't hear it. I hear party politics, and the crisis is not here yet, but it's coming soon. And it would be nice to hear somebody that,
as somebody who studies history, as you mentioned, can you give me an example of where that system might have worked in history that you're discussing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can look at the democracies, how they responded. I mean, we'll go to World War II as the best example. I mean, dictatorships have an advantage because they can mobilize all the forces of their country and direct it towards one purpose. Democracies are traditionally takes time because there's, one party is in power and putting in these policies, and then another party's in power and then takes back half of what they've done.
Yeah.
And this happened prior to World War II. Churchill was crying to say, Germany's rearming. We need to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until, the war began that all the power of the democracy, and where everyone believes, and I mean, that's the power of democracy, the people's will can be enacted. And the entire country worked tirelessly, America and the UK, and it was a national government. There are cabinet ministers from all parties involved. Mm. And it's traditionally, when this is not the case, and maybe I can go back to quite far, maybe to the War of the Spanish Succession at the beginning of the 19th century, where a Whig government was put in power. So it was a party government, and it undid, it undid all the work that had been done by the national government before in the last years of the war, and they lost. They made a very bad peace. So what I see, I'm not saying that there's going to be another world war, but I mean, certainly the crises that we are going to have in these next few years, a national government is what is needed. where everyone is on board for a long period of time. And I do worry that, if the Liberals continue with what they're doing, that's not good. I mean, if the Conservatives get in, it's the same thing. They will just undo, half of what was done before.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Graham. Appreciate your comments. Thanks for the call. Take care. Darren, hello.
Hi. I just wanted to respond to what Graham said. He said he didn't hear either party talking about, the global aspect, the national aspect. Carney has. He said that our relationship, as we've known it for the past 80 years with the U.S., is over, and we have to find new trading partners and build Canada. I don't know what he's talking about or what he's listening to, but I've heard a lot of that from Carney. But anyway, that's not
true. It's
what
absolutely true.
What I want to talk about. I just want to come to your defense a bit, because the previous very confused caller said that people in the media shouldn't have an opinion. I just caught the tail end of that. He's confusing people in the media with journalists, like Walter Cronkite.
Yeah, exactly.
There's lots of people in the media that have their opinion. That's what their whole careers are about. And I don't think you consider yourself a journalist and follow journalistic standards, do you?
Not anymore. I was a journalist and have worked as and I know what it's like to wear that hat. But as a talk show host, absolutely not. I'm not. Exactly. I am not operating as a journalist right now. I'm operating as a host of a show, and it's priority job one for me to have an opinion. And my boss wouldn't be very happy with me, and I don't think the callers would be either if I sat here and said I don't have any opinions anymore. I'm just going to spew facts. I don't think that would go very far.
No, he's just trying to stop you from expressing your opinion because he knows people listen to you and he doesn't like what you say. So.
Well, there you go.
Ridiculous.
What do you mean doesn't like what I say? People don't like what I say? My God, no, I'm only kidding around here. And listen, to that point, it goes with it that when I'm going to have an opinion, and I do have an opinion, just like you, when you call, you're going to spark other people's opinions, and not everybody's going to agree, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I don't know what he's thinking, that you're just a facilitator for callers. Like that's.
Yeah.
You've never pretended to be that. So I don't know.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Okay, Darren, thanks for the call, pal.
No problem.
All right, take care. All right. And Tom, go ahead quickly if you can, please, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Good. Couple things. Back in 1979, I think it was about that time when Newfoundland was bursting with oil from Hibernia. Mm-hmm. And we were going to be rich beyond our beliefs, and 40 years later, we're still half the poorest provinces in the country. Alberta's out there sitting on all kinds of oil, believing that they're the people that's saving Canada. Ontario has $1 trillion of GDP. Quebec and Alberta combined doesn't reach $1 trillion of GDP. Stop with the Alberta saving the country crap. It's Ontario. Ontario is Canada. We need to get on board with Ontario to save this country. That's all.
Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. We'll open the phone lines again tomorrow between noon and 1. It's a Wednesday. That means Dr. Gillis will be by between 11 and 12. And, yeah, it's Tuesday. That means Rob Thacker when we come back. All right, it's the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. If you've got a question for Rob Thacker, give us a buzz. Again, 902-405-6000. Rob Thacker, what was it like for 2 weeks without having to deal with me? That must have been a treat for you, wasn't it?
Crush it. How did we survive?
I know, eh?
No, it's always I'm gonna make you jealous. No, I like doing the show with Dan as well. We get into some long conversations sometimes, which is a little bit unusual. Dan obviously was schooling me on ethanol and gas as well. So
is that right?
I learned
well, Dan likes to pretend that he knows what he's talking about.
Ooh, well, I'll let the two of you argue about that afterwards.
No, I'm just kidding. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. Look, I wanted to ask you about the the Katy Perry all-female crew launch into space on Blue Origin yesterday. You kind of gave me a bit of an eye roll when I brought this up when you first came into the studio. Why are you a little indifferent about this?
So what gets me about this is there are a lot of issues with women involved in aerospace, right? And the problem I have with it is this kind of publicity is not doing that a great deal of good, in my opinion, right? If you want to really look at the employment of women within aerospace, then you need to start looking at the fundamental feeders, the fundamental issues with involvement of women in aerospace and universities and so on, and looking at the cultures there, right? Great that this shows young women, look, hey, you can go on a Blue Origin flight too. All sorts of questions about the privilege involved in this as well, but let's not even go there. So, but I don't know. Like this, I mean, maybe if Bezos had said, okay, we're going to do a bunch of scholarships for women at universities and aerospace, then I'd be more positive about it. But at the moment, and perhaps that is there, I don't know. But at the moment, it just seems a little bit like of a bandwagon thing.
Okay, do you think that they kind of went for the bigger moment that didn't happen? Was it a bit of a flop, I guess, or?
No, I don't know. I mean, there's Blue Origin has a habit of doing these splashy launches to get interest, right? Yeah. So they did that with Shatner, right? And I mean, Shatner did his eloquent, oh, this is incredible. Here I am, a 90-year-old going up and doing this kind of bit. But at the end of the day, I mean, this isn't, it's not really an orbital flight. I mean, it's space tourism, and I'm not a huge fan of space tourism, to be honest, right? And this is just more of the same. Like, I really feel there are issues with women in aerospace, but this isn't getting to that.
Very interesting. Okay, 902-405-6000. Jeff, you've given us a call. Hello, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. Dr. Thacker, I have a general question, and I do apologize that it is not an Einstein question.
Okay.
But I hear more and more frequently about earthquakes, the most recent one in California. What is the connection between an earthquake and a sinkhole, and what are the recipes for both to happen?
Okay, so... Okay, I'm not a geologist, so preface that with all of my sort of answers to this. But sinkholes in general are a distinctly different phenomena, as far as I know, from earthquakes. With earthquakes, you're looking at situations of stress embedded within the ground. And so that can be the plates, as we know, which causes, as you get big movements of those plates, you can have the huge earthquakes, sort of like the 9.0 Chile-style earthquakes. And so that is a situation where you are relieving stress via literally physical motion of the plates. But with something like a sinkhole, then you've got a situation of below ground, an area that is often some kind of strata that can be essentially eroded away by water over time, right? And so when you have that, you've got underground water that's slowly taking away the structural properties of the ground as it moves all of that material solely through a flow process, right? And so that's distinct from what you have when you have the sudden release of energy in an earthquake. In this case, with the sinkhole, you've got something where you've got things that are slowly being moved away, reducing the structural integrity, and then things collapse downwards like that. That's the kind of thing we actually see in Nova Scotia, yeah.
Okay. So we're demographically, where we are, both are extremely highly unlikely.
So, I mean, where was it? We had that big sinkhole in Oxford a few years ago, didn't we? So we do get them, yeah. And so in terms of serious earthquakes, we've had small ones here. I can remember we had a 3.5, something like that. I can't remember where the epicenter was. I think it was up in New Brunswick somewhere. So, but we don't have anything bigger, sort of like and remember it's a logarithmic scale as well. So this is going up in factors of 10. So we don't have any of the big 7.0 and above type earthquakes out here.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, no thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Eric, hello.
Hey, first of all, congratulations to you and Kelly, and welcome back.
Thank you,
Rob,
sir.
I know you said that yesterday was a sightseeing tour, but I'm just wondering, and I know you might not want to answer this, but do you think someday, maybe not in our lifetime, but you think women could land on the moon?
Do I think women could? Absolutely, right? No question. Look, there's absolutely no reason why a woman astronaut cannot do the same job as a male astronaut. Mm-hmm. None, right? Seriously, right? Yeah. And so we will have women on the moon in the near-term future. I mean, that's one of the plans that NASA has, right? And so, look, I'm honestly, you want to put the best people you can up there, and sometimes it's going to be a woman. Just got to face it, right? And so we need to build the best crews we can, right? We've had excellent commanders of the International Space Station who are women, right? And this is just not a shock. It's not a shock to me because I work with some amazing female astrophysicists all the time, right? So this doesn't come as it's kind of ridiculous it hasn't happened, but anyway, we'll get there in the end.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rob.
Yeah.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. You mentioned the International Space Station, and one of the two people was a woman that was stranded up there for the better part of a year, right?
Cindy Williams, yep.
Yeah, yep. And so, again, the focus on that, and look, go back to the Challenger, when there was a teacher, a woman, I can't remember her name, but...
Macaulay?
Yeah, that's right. But that's another example, and we're going back decades now, where women have been doing this for a very long time, right?
Yeah, I mean, so if we go back in the history of space, then the first woman in space was a Soviet, right? And so you might sort of like want to argue that the Soviets were further ahead in terms of feminism and so on. So that's just... And the Mercury 13 story, that's now well known and understood, right? So we kind of know that there was some really pretty inappropriate things going on back in the early stages of the space program in the US in terms of keeping women down. Yeah. So, but for goodness sake, let's learn from that. I mean, honestly, I work with so many brilliant female colleagues, right? Don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't be the best in a given scenario, right? Just being totally upfront and honest.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Here's an email question from Mark. Mark says, James Webb Telescope recently discovered galaxies in the early universe that are far larger than they expected or hypothesized they should be. What is going on? Does this change the theory of how the early universe was created?
Yeah, so this is one of these things where you've really got to keep up with what's going on all the time. So initially, there was a lot of data that was taken by James Webb that suggests we had this large number of massive galaxies early on in the universe. And, wow, we were going to have to turn this all over. Our theories of galaxy formation were just sort of like out the wazoo. There was Michio Kaku interviewed on CNN saying, you're going to have to rewrite the textbooks and everything. Well, actually, that turned out to be wrong. And one of the key papers showing that was wrong was actually published by Guillaume Dupre, who was at St. Mary's when he did that, right? So if people are wondering, does good stuff happen at St. Mary's? Yes, it does. So Guillaume Dupre, Marcin Savitsky, and a group of people at St. Mary's wrote a paper showing that what was actually happening was a confusion over the sources to a certain extent, and the estimates of the star formation rates were out, right? So when the analysis had been done, and it was on a small number of objects as well, which makes your probability of getting things out bigger, right? Once that was done, then we came to realize, it wasn't as crazy as we thought it was. Now, there are still a few very large galaxies that we see, that there's the so-called big wheel and so on. But it comes down to a question of probability. And it's very difficult to get that probability estimate right at this point because James Webb doesn't see very much of the sky. Right, so we're still working through all of those things, but the key things of the being just too many of these big things far away and so on, that seems to have actually been an overclaim. Let's put it that way.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. It's the Science Files with Rob Thacker, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University, of course, taking your calls. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. James is giving us a buzz. Hello, James.
Hi, thanks. This is a broad question, but I know Rob Thatcher is very knowledgeable. Climate change. If we were to continue on our current emissions levels, if nothing changed after today, would be the implications in the next 10, 25, 50 years? And the reason I ask that question is that there's so much hype on both sides. It just seems like a nice, moderate scientific analysis would be helpful.
Okay. So, I mean, to be honest, there are projections that are done based upon different scenarios, right? So that is actually done in the IPCC report, right? And pulling the numbers off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I'm not a climate scientist, I'm going to struggle to do that. But as far as I know, if we follow what's called the business as usual scenario, then by the end of the century, we're looking at least 3 degrees of increased warming, right? And so in terms of the near-term impacts, like in the 20-year sort of like time frame, the challenge with that kind of things is we're struggling to be able to correlate climate to weather changes. It's really hard to do. There's something called the weather attribution collaboration. And so they try to take climate models and then figure out what the probability of a given weather outcome is based upon changes in climate models. But it's very difficult science to do. And it's difficult science to do because when you're looking at extreme events, which is one of the things that when we have the most damage, although I will say heat waves and deaths from heat waves are starting to become a bigger and bigger concern. Let's not forget that. But when you look at things like flooding and so on, those things are actually quite difficult to relate directly back to climate change in terms of actual local weather patterns, right? So that kind of stuff is pretty difficult. But as far as I know, the business as usual scenario is at least 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may. Obviously, climate change impacts will be different depending on where you live in the world. Mm-hmm. What about Nova Scotia? What should we be thinking about?
Well, so in Nova Scotia, I mean, the obvious risks that we have here are warming oceans, and that gives us an increased hurricane risk, right? We've had Cat 4s in Nova Scotia waters. So that has happened, right? And you've got to say, sooner or later, the probability of having a really big system come through here is increasing. Like one of the things I have actually said to certain people in the government is we should be thinking about the building code here, right? And things like that. So floods, right? That's an issue. We're also looking at lower rainfall too. So people who've been following what's been the underwater aquifers in Nova Scotia, they're low. Right, we've had a number of years of low rainfall, and now we've started having more risk of fire. And the risk of fire combined with heavy downpours, it's not a good combination, right? Because you literally bake the surface after you've had fires, and then if you have a huge amount of water come down in a deluge, it literally just flows off it, right? So there's a lot of things to think about. And in general, there are very few places where you can look and say, oh yeah, climate change looks good. Right? Because in general, the more climate change you have, the more weather extremes you get. And weather extremes are problematic. I mean, let's not forget, the vast majority of crops grow outside. Food security is an issue for the future. It really is.
Thank you. Okay. Very informative.
Okay. Thanks, James. Appreciate the call. Take care. Yeah. 902-405-6000. Paul, hello.
Yes, good afternoon. Dr. Rob, SpaceX recently sent a manned crew on what I believe was the first ever polar.
Yeah.
The question is why? Why haven't they done manned polar orbits before?
So honestly, my suspicion would be that's largely down to. I don't want to sound cynical, but. Other than doing it and sort of like flying around in these areas where you've got increased radiation exposure, it's not that different from being on an equatorial orbit, right? So, I mean, I'm sure there are people in the field who would take issue with me saying that and saying, well, there are all of these things we haven't done before that we really like doing and want to find out more about, like, I don't know, the magnetic field density in those areas and so on. But in terms of raw spaceflight, I don't honestly see how it's significantly different to the equatorial orbits that we've been doing for decades, right? So I'm sure I'm doing something shortchanged by doing that, but personally, I wasn't sort of holding my breath for it, right? And at the end of the day, one of the key issues may simply just have been what's the so-called rocket delta V to get into that orbit. You have to put quite a lot of energy in to go into a polar orbit if you launch from the equator. You have to get rid of your equatorial orbit.
You don't have the advantage of the Earth's spin, I guess.
Exactly. And so if you're going to do that, you actually need a fair amount of fuel to do it, right? So most of the time, I don't think there's not enough things that I can point to that are hugely interesting for us to sort of like do those kind of missions on a regular basis. Right, but there would have been things about the radiation, magnetic field, and so on, for sure.
At the poles, yeah. What about the risk of collision? Are polar? I know why they have polar orbits and equatorial orbits and things, but is there a preponderance of one over the other? In other words, if you're on a polar orbit, is it like trying to cross a eight-lane highway?
So this is a really interesting question, because if you'd asked me this 10 years ago, I would have said, most of the satellites are in equatorial-like orbits, right? And so if you're up there with that, most of the time you're sort of in a similar rotational state. So that's really not too big a deal to worry about. You can monitor that. Now, of course, with things like SpaceX and Starlink constellation, you've got all of these satellites on different orbits, right? And so now, and considering that those are the bulk of the things up there, right, then you're pretty much the same, regardless of which orbit you're in, would be my guess. So I'd have to see the actual distribution to be sure about that. But in terms of the actual orbital risk, then it's probably pretty similar now.
Okay. And what about hybrid orbits where you're sort of in between the polar and the equator? Would that be kind of the sweet spot?
So there are some of those, right? So SpaceX will have some satellites on those orbits. There's also something called the Sun Synchronous Orbit, which puts you over the same place on the surface of the Earth at the same time each day. You can imagine that's very good for doing land surveys, crop surveys, and things like that. Right, so that's quite a popular orbit. In fact, that's one of the things that they were trying to sell the CANSO on the basis of, that you'd be able to put satellites into those orbits quite efficiently from CANSO.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. If you've got a question for Rob, give us a buzz. We've got some time for you at the top of the hour. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files with Rob Thacker continues. Astrophysicist at St. Mary's University. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. We've got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour and get some room for you as well. Bobby's giving us a call. Hello, Bobby.
Hello, gentlemen. My question is, Apophis is supposed to come close to Earth, like in 2029, I think it is. And I was just wondering, is it possible for something to bump it, like another rock, and to hit it, another asteroid?
Don't throw anything. That's incredibly unlikely, right? So, no one's really going to be worried about that at this point. I can't remember it's like only 20,000 miles or something like that. So
yeah, there's 32,000 kilometers. I was reading, but.
Yeah. So I mean, that's close for sure, as these things go. I mean, that's 1/10 of the Earth-Moon distance, so that's really pretty close as we measure these things. But no, it's the only thing that people might sort of like be concerned about is like whether we do the calculations of the sun's radiation pressure on the asteroid properly. But for this sort of like, what are we talking about, 4 years? It's probably not a big deal at all.
Oh, okay. So is like somebody out there mapping the other asteroids around us, like to see if they're going to collide?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going on all the time. So there's a big database that we're constantly adding things to. And could there be a close approach? Yeah, but in general, these things are going fairly quickly, right? And so if you're going fairly quickly, then you can probably do the math. That means that your probability of being close to something is low because you're constantly getting away from one another, right? So there's just a high level of velocity dispersion between these objects.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A quick one. I was wondering what if we found like a asteroid full of really rare Earth minerals and we crashed it into the moon, let's say, and then just went up there to go mine it? Would that be possible?
Well, I mean, honestly, there's things that have crashed into the moon already. So who knows what deposits are up there? I'm not suggesting we go and look, but that's obviously what we've relied upon in the Earth, like Sudbury and all the nickel deposits there. So could we actually get it to crash into the moon? Would it be sensible? The problem is we've got a bit of what I'll call the last mile problem, because no matter what we do in terms of putting stuff on the moon, we've still got to get it back down to Earth. And there's really no easy way of doing that, right? And this is the thing that I keep sort of like trying to point out to people. When we talk about asteroid mining and the potential for that, we're really talking about the potential for that in terms of doing things in outer space. Like bringing things back to the Earth, right, and through the atmosphere is just really, really expensive, right? There's no two ways about it. And so I don't see, other than maybe platinum, gold, maybe very expensive rare earth metals, right? But other than that, I really can't see a near-term future for things unless someone magically solves something. People have talked about putting big sort of like pieces of foam and building what's called lifting body aerodynamic systems. But even then, you still can't control these things as they come down. It's pretty risky.
Oh, it's interesting. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the call. Yeah. Take care. 902-405-6000. Kevin, hello.
Hi, guys. How are you?
We're well.
Good.
Yeah. A question for Dr. Rob. Artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
How much confidence can we put into their answers and stuff?
Oh, that's a really good question, right? So you got half an hour.
Actually, no.
It entirely depends upon what the question is, right? And so let me start with something that's really basic, but this will give you an idea, right? So if you literally multiply two numbers together, you think AI would be able to do that pretty well, right? Yeah. And so what people have done, there's a researcher at the University of Waterloo who said, like, let's keep on making the numbers bigger and bigger and bigger and see when it breaks. And, you know, if you take two numbers that have 20 digits in them, AI systems won't be able to tell you what the two numbers multiplied together is with any kind of realistic accuracy at all. Most of the time they get it wrong. Right?
Oh.
Yeah.
I would have guessed it was the other way.
No. And so if you're doing sort of like 300 times 500, yeah, they'll get that right. But when you do something with 20 digits multiplied by something else with 20 digits, they'll get it wrong. Right. And you can also see this, like, obviously I teach physics, and so I have to check what do these systems do with the homework questions that I set. And quite often they'll make basic mathematical errors, right, in their derivations. Right. And that's when you have something that takes a number of lines to do, and then suddenly, boop, there'll be a basic error in there. Right. And so
I've been doing. Go ahead.
So the kind of errors they make are actually quite unpredictable, and that's the big problem, right? You can't tell precisely ahead of time when you're going to get an error, right? And so that's what makes them frustrating. You can say humans make errors. Yes, they do. Absolutely, we do. But it's the kind of errors that we make that are quite different from AI. As you have expertise, you don't tend to make silly errors. Right, you get over that. Now, every now and again, I had a very, very silly thing I did many years ago. I posted something on social media, and as soon as I posted it, I'm like, oh, that's silly, and that's wrong. And I deleted it immediately. But most of the time, you don't do that as you develop expertise. But with AI, it just makes those errors, right? And so that's one of the real challenges with it.
Yeah, this is terrible because I've been doing a bit of work and I've been using really big numbers, exponential kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And AI's been working well for me, but now I got to go back and go through it all again.
Okay, so the golden rule in all of this is AIs make mistakes. It's right there on the webpage, right? And you need to check, right? So if you've got a basic system of checking that you can run something through a spreadsheet or something like that, then yeah, do it.
Yeah. A question off the side of that, just I looked up your email on SMU. Mm-hmm. Is that do you answer emails from people you don't know?
It depends upon the question.
I'm working on something, and I don't want to say it on the radio.
Okay.
But would you be interested in hearing an email?
Okay, people email me all the time, so I can't sit here and say no. Sure.
Okay. All right, guys. That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay,
guys.
thanks, Kev. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. Here's an email question from Tom. Tom says, given the hollowing out of NASA and issues with Boeing Starliner, does Rob Thacker believe that the U.S. will be able to put humans back on the moon before, say, the Chinese?
Yes, but primarily because of SpaceX, right? And to be honest, the SpaceX route of going to the moon is not a particularly efficient one. You have to do a number of in-orbit refuelings to actually get enough fuel up there for it to go. So once people start understanding that, I think SpaceX is going to be a lot less popular, right? Because literally, when NASA was pushing them on how many in-orbit refuelings do they have to go to the moon, they couldn't give them a straight answer, somewhere between 8 and 12, right? So that's a lot of launches just to do one landing on the moon. Now, why do they need that? Because literally, if you go back to Apollo, you were putting a couple of tons on the moon. SpaceX is putting literally 100 tons on the moon, right? So there's a huge difference in the amount of fuel that you need to do that, and that's why there's such a big difference in that. So I think that on that basis, the Artemis rocket has by and large not been a great success for NASA. It's okay, but it's had a number of issues. And it's designed in a very sort of, I don't know, it feels a little bit kludgy. It wasn't really designed from scratch. They used the shuttle boosters and so on. So there's a number of things that fed into that design that perhaps starting from scratch, they could have done better. And so will we use Artemis? Yes, but the plan for going to the moon is still a rendezvous in orbit around the moon. You get into the SpaceX vehicle and then you go down to the surface. So going back to the moon is pretty much all in SpaceX's hands right now.
What about the Elon Musk brand? That could be at play as well, or no?
Well, right now, the Elon Musk brand is in government, right?
Yeah.
There's a conflict of interest.
But that could change and will change. At some point, that'll change.
My sort of reaction to it is to say, in pretty much everything we do, we like to have competition. Right? And having a single supplier in this case, I don't think is good, even if SpaceX has been very innovative, don't get me wrong. And there will obviously be international competition because Chinese companies are going all in on landable boosters. That's very clear. They are all in on reusable rocketry technology. But just having one developer and supplier, I'm not sure that's a good thing for the US.
902-405-6000. Here's an email question from Joseph. It says, could Dr. Thacker share your thoughts on the credibility of the Galileo project led by Harvard University astrophysicist Dr. Avi Loeb? Do you find its methodology and data interpretations consistent with current astrophysical understanding?
So I've got to be honest. This is all about bits of rock found at the bottom of the ocean. And I don't want to get into something where the precise geology of these things is a bit of a debate. There is some logic in sort of saying there's a lot of stuff that's lying on the ocean floor that potentially might have some connection to if materials have come to the Earth via ancient technologies, whatever, then obviously most of the surface of the Earth is water, so you would think that there's a higher probability these things would be underwater than on land. Mm-hmm. And so all of that said, there's an awful lot of pushback from the geology community on these things and the evidence that Avi, who quite frankly was for many years a highly respected astrophysicist who did lots of work in what we call early universe cosmology, reionization of the universe. And so all of that said, this is something when there is a lot of contention, and honestly, I'm not up to date enough on it to really give you a straight viewpoint on it. And there are nonetheless people prepared to give him quite a bit of money to go off and do this.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. Bryce is giving us a call. Hello, Bryce.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Going
Good.
well.
I understand that you're an astrophysicist.
Yep.
I thought, just to touch on the other person that was talking, he was talking about the confidence of AI, whether to believe it. I mean, truthfully, I think it's a replication of whatever we want it to be.
So I mean,
you know what I mean?
It's trained on the knowledge that we have, for sure.
Yes, exactly. That's what I meant. But my question is, are you familiar with what a zombie star is?
A zombie star? Not off the top of my head.
Okay. It's a supernova that can, like, you know what a supernova is?
Yeah.
Star,
no problem there. Yep.
It's when it revives itself. So I just was wondering if you could simplify how that's even possible. But anyways. Sorry.
So this is going to be the type of supernova where something gets left behind and then is building up material, so it's re-exploding, as it were?
Dies. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's when a star dies and comes back to life.
Yeah,
I don't know how it's possible.
So that's not going to be possible without feeding it something, right? I mean... So, I mean, that's the kind of thing I would imagine happening when you have some kind of companion, right? Because I can't see how if you have an explosion and you get rid of material, then the only way you're going to get back to a situation in which you can have another explosion is if you actually if you're big enough, you actually have a probability of what's called fallback, where the material, the ejector, will actually come back. But you have to be very big to do that. You have to be like neutron star black hole mass to do that.
Yeah, it says specifically a type lax supernova, so I don't know what that means. But
that's probably 1A. 1AX, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering if there's any, like, cool explanation. But I get
this
it.
is probably one of those things where the name is cooler than the actual physics, which does tend to happen more and more.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? I mean,
it's
this
really,
is... Actually, I was talking... I can't leave it there, because I was talking to Todd before the show started, saying that in the last 15 years, right, in an effort to get more science funding, there's been a growth of what I'll call marketing for scientists. And it's not dishonest, but it is... If you want to get people to pay attention, how can I sell this story? Right, and so using something that's popular in the vernacular, like zombie star, right? That kind of thing has crept in more and more, and quite often when you actually sort of like talk to people about what's actually going on, it's not quite as cool. I mean, every now and again, it's a really good analogy. Like, I mean, what was the yellow warblers having road rage, right? Birds having road rage, right? And so that came up in a story because they tracked what happened to the warblers when they were nesting 50 meters from the road. And the answer is because their song was drowned out, they had to defend their territories physically. So they got more aggressive, right? And so they said that the birds had road rage, which was cute, right? Because the actual science of that is as great as the story you use to tell it, right? But for this,
has got me. The marketing's probably had me for 4 years because I've known about it for about 4 years.
Yeah.
And I just never actually learned anything about it. That's why I called.
Okay.
But, it needs a companion. That's
okay.
Nice.
I've actually just pulled up. So they have a lower ejection velocity and a lower luminosity. So that's suggestive to me that they possibly can actually recycle material, right?
Yeah, how is that possible? That's what mind boggles me, is there's actually a reverse to destruction out there somewhere. I would say it hasn't blown itself completely apart, and that's the reason why you have that. Because if you have a big enough remnant, then you are going to just pull stuff down that's left around. So it's like gravitational pull back almost? Yeah, you'll have that. I mean, if you don't blow the central white dwarf apart when you have the supernovae, then you have a very heavy object there still waiting to pull things toward it. Very cool. Thank you for thanks for talking. Yep.
Okay. Thanks for calling 902-405-6000. Brian, hello.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for taking my call. My question is this, Dr. Rob. You guys are always talking about you can't travel faster than the speed of light because we have mass. Mm-hmm. Now, is there a mathematical formula that if you have a spaceship, and I'm just going to pick a number, 100,000 tons, is there a formula that can say, all right, well, this ship can only go this fast because of its mass?
No. Right. So the thing is, you can get arbitrarily close to the speed of light, but it becomes harder and harder and harder to do that in terms of the energy that you need. Right. So there's something called the gamma factor. And the gamma factor is 1 minus the velocity squared over the speed of light squared. So basically, as your velocity gets closer and closer to the speed of light, you can see that 1 minus becomes closer and closer to 0. And so that number basically divides the energy you require. So your energy goes to infinity.
Okay, so basically, if you had enough energy, you could, but you just don't have enough energy to do it.
Exactly, you got it. That's the limit. It's not that something of a certain mass can only go so fast. That's not true. It's that you're going to need a stupid amount of energy the bigger it is, basically.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you very much. That answers my question.
Okay.
All right, thanks for the call. Take care. All right, just before we run out of time, I wanted to a story that you sent along. I thought was pretty interesting, Rob. I thought we'd highlight it. And this from The Guardian. Older people who use smartphones have lower rates of cognitive decline. Analysis of over 50 to engage with phones, tablets, and other devices challenges fears of digital dementia. Interesting findings here.
Yeah, so this is controversial. Like, let's be honest. So there's been some studies where there have been arguments that older people using digital devices and just basically sitting in a chair with their iPad is not good for them and can lead to this so-called digital dementia. What I think this research is really suggesting is that it's really about how you use the tools. That's the key thing, because as long as you're being stimulated and you're doing things and you're thinking, being critical and so on, then there's no reason why an electronic vehicle can't give you that, right? And so this is what that is suggesting. I also do have some concerns that it's weird, but there might even be a bias here, depending upon the actual intellectual capability of the older person to want to use an electronic data processing system, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, whatever. So it's there's going to be more things come out of this research. But what they're trying to point out that if you look at what keeps people going, it's complexity, connection, and also something called compensatory behaviors.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say the connectivity of it as well is huge, right? With family and all that goes with that. So
there are some sort of like personal interactions that can be very sort of like low value, low return, right? Yeah. Not being challenged and so on. So that can be an issue. But at the same time, you can have things that really are stimulating and making you think. Like my mother-in-law is really pretty incredible. Started a French group at 75, and here they are 10 years later still going, right? So that's pretty unbelievable. And so she is very stimulated and not slowing down at all, which I find absolutely... I would love to be as sharp as she is at 85.
Yeah, for sure. Rob, always great. Thanks so much, my friend. Appreciate it, and we'll do it again next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
All right, that's Rob Thacker. That's the Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness as well on the other side of the glass, doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.